What's going on, everyone, and welcome to yet another edition of Open Run. My name is Gabriel Wilkins, and I'm back right beside my colleague and fellow co-host, Josh Hicks, to talk on all things strictly pertaining to matters on the hardwood at the beginning of a new week as the conference finals are still in action. How have things been for you, Josh?
Good, brother. Good as always, man. I'm ready to dive in on some good basketball talk as always.
Oh, indeed. And in this week's installment of Open Run, me and Josh will share our thoughts after taking the time to analyze and watch the first three games of the conference finals matchups between the Heat and Celtics in the East, as well as the Lakers and Nuggets out West that have transpired since our previous recording, on top of also having a discussion on whether or not we are officially witnessing the end of an era in regards to one of the game's most accomplished players and much more. But before we do that, let's take a little time to show some love to some of the game's greats, as we always do, to tip things off here on Open Run in our hoop shout out segment. Special hoop shout outs go out to Denver Nuggets guard Jamal Murray for becoming only the fourth player in the last quarter century to have 330-plus point halves in the playoffs, joining all-stars such as Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker, and Allen Iverson in that club, after going off for 30 in the first half of play on the way to a 37-point night to help the Nuggets win in Game 3 of the Western Conference Finals and move one step closer to the franchise's first NBA Finals appearance this past weekend, as well as Miami Heat star forward Jimmy Butler, who became just the third player in NBA playoff history to record multiple games of 35-plus points, 5-plus rebounds, assists, and steals in a single postseason, after exploding for 35 points to go with 7 dimes, 6 steals, and 5 boards to help his squad capture a 7-point victory on the road against the Boston Celtics in Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Finals, with Miami up 3-0 in that series as well. And last but not least, the number 3 overall pick in the 2003 NBA draft, Carmelo Anthony, is the 10-time NBA All-Star and 6-time All-NBA selection, who captured 3 Olympic gold medals for Team USA on the way to scoring over 28,000 points in his iconic career, announced that he is officially retiring from the game of basketball after 19 incredible professional seasons at the beginning of this week. So, Josh, after taking some time to pay respect to a few of the game's most accomplished talents, what are some things across the basketball world that's either stood out or impressed you the most over the last several days?
I'm going to go with Breanna Stewart. 45 on the front on her home debut.
I'm glad you brought that
up. Yeah. When you watch the way she gave you those buckets, man, how do you want it? Like, it didn't matter which way you pushed her to go. She got the job done, and it really showed you how exciting the New York Liberty are going to be this year. Because what she brings to the table, along with Sabrina, man, that's it's nasty to think about, man. And, Breanna is showing the league that, I'm back. I'm fully back, and I got a new squad with me. This ain't the Seattle days. This is a new era. And the Las Vegas Aces, obviously, you talk about with them two most likely between the Las Vegas Aces and New York Liberty meeting up in the WNBA Finals, which we all want that. But when that time comes, it ain't gonna be no easy thing. Ace is going to have a tough time repeating, and Breanna Stewart is going to be one of the biggest reasons why. So to see her perform the way that she did was incredible. But to me, the really biggest thing, BG, Brittany Griner, not only starting off the season, with her first game coming back from that unfortunate circumstance with Russia, but, playing well in her first home game. Want to say she had double doubles, and we talked about last show about how we was wondering if she was gonna push herself, and Mercury was gonna push herself to being back to the all-star caliber player that she is. Well, she kind of showed us that she hasn't really missed a step. She's going pretty strong, and she did a very good job against the Chicago Sky before the Sky won their game. So those are my two big ones that I really paid attention to. Obviously, Breanna Stewart and her 45-point performance, but Brittany Griner, actually seeing her on the court, being home, and playing well on her home floor is a very special thing to see.
Oh, for sure. That was one of the greatest debuts in WNBA history, if not home debut. I think she put up a record for most points in a home debut with a new team. So what Brianna did, she definitely lit the Indiana Fever up for like the majority of that game. And I'm glad to see that, because you need performances like that in the WNBA, which helps only bring more attention to the sport. So I'm glad to see that. And of course, when you bring up Brittany Griner and what she was able to do, she looked like she's not missing a beat on offense. It's going to be a real scary sight for the league once she continues to regain her conditioning and finds it to where she's at her peak level. Because if she's doing this and she's not even at her peak level from a conditioning standpoint, I can only imagine what it's going to look like for opposing defenders once she get in tip-top shape and she really gets her confidence back up to where she had it prior to undergoing everything that transpired in Russia. But one thing that stood out to me is the news regarding the retirement of Carmelo Anthony.
Yeah.
We talking about a guy who was the first signature athlete on Jordan brand. And when I say signature athlete, what I'm saying is he's the first man outside of his airness himself to have his own shoe with the brand. And you consider his career and how he was one of the most accomplished scorers of his generation. He doesn't really get a lot of the credit and the flowers that he deserves. And he sure as hell didn't get it over the last few years, having to, wait his turn to get on a roster, signing in places for the vet minimum and so forth, despite being a walking bucket, no matter where he's played or where he's been throughout his career. And I wish that people will take this time to pay homage to Melo fully, because he deserves it. And I think it's unfortunate that he had to go out this way, because in some ways it feels a little bit forced. But I like the fact that when he made his retirement video, that he's seeking to pass the knowledge and the tutelage that he's gained over his 19 years playing in the NBA to his son, Kion. And it's a lot of people who love to say, well, he never won a championship. Well, for those who don't understand or don't know about the business of basketball, if he had played things out the way that D Wade and LeBron James did, following their rookie deals and signed just a 3-year deal, he would have been on that free agent market in 2010 with those guys. But instead, he signed a 5-year deal and opted to take the money in Denver. And he wasn't able to get out of it because he didn't have an opt-out clause after 3 seasons. That's what did him in, because he was really supposed to be the original member of the Big Three in South Beach over Chris Bosh. And I'm glad Stephen A. Smith pointed that out for those who forget it. And I want to point that out here on Open Run, man. Like, Carmelo is a guy who is a true basketball lifer. And coming up as a kid, he really laid a lot of trends that you see currently in the game today. Before Carmelo did it, it wasn't really cool to be a one and done prospect. He did that all the while coming off of a national championship with Syracuse, which was Jim Boeheim's lone national championship as a head coach with that program. And when you think about how Boeheim just recently stepped down as the head coach at Syracuse and Carmelo Anthony is now retiring, it all comes full circle 20 years later, near the time in which they had captured that national championship. And oh, by the way, the day that we recording this actually marks the 20th anniversary of LeBron signing with Nike. So it's kind of like the end of an era. And I just want to tip my cap to Melo in that regard. But another thing that stood out to me is this unnecessary hate towards Victor Wembanyama. I don't get it. I think a lot of basketball fans need to understand the difference between self-created hype versus what comes from the media and how to separate the two from one another with the outlets that they consume. You have guys like Adrian Wojnarowski on ESPN saying, well, he's the best prospect ever in like the history of sports or something like that. That's his opinion. Now, you can say that he may be saying that to drive up ratings or whatever, and that could be the case. His job is to sell the game. But as a fan of the game and as a purveyor of the game, it's your job to know how to separate the difference between the two. And I think a lot of fans are failing to do that. And in turn, they're really starting to like talk a lot of shit about Wembanyama, and I think they don't understand that this is a 19-year-old kid. He didn't ask for this. He's just trying to play the game he loves, man, and take care of his family. Let's provide some perspective with that. And I think we need to do it because there's some people that just fail to realize how much they let the media shape their narrative on how they see things. And just because it may be the narrative within the majority of the media realm or the masses of that field, it doesn't mean it has to be your narrative. But to sit up here and say, well, he's not going to be successful, that's an opinionated thing. We don't know. Just sit back and enjoy the show, man. I think he's going to give the team that he goes to his all, and I'm excited to see him in the league. And I think we all should be. No matter if we 25 and up and we came up in a LeBron generation, we owe him a debt of gratitude to see how his career plays out before we seek to assess and just judge him on everything when he's not a finished product yet.
Media studies 101, man. Understanding the message, but also understanding the mediums the message come from.
Yep.
If you don't understand what that looks like, yeah, you will be scrutinized for the rest of your life, because that's the difference between truth and false, truth and fairy tale. So yeah, it's unfortunate Victor Wembanyama has to go through that. Obviously, like you said, he is a young kid that shows a lot of promise. And with that promise, you know, especially going to an organization like the Spurs, who is known for handling top tier big men and winning championships, multiple championships, might I add, with those big men, you can't help but look at Victor Wembanyama and see how can he not be next on that list. It's just kind of, if you just follow history, that's common sense. But yeah, I'm pretty sure he's like everybody else. He just wants the ball, and we just gonna give him the respect that he deserves, and continue to watch his career and watch him flourish and see what he brings to the game, which I know is gonna be something special. Carmelo Anthony, though, man, you really hit it on the nail in the coffin with him, man. I remember going back to the actual draft, man. The actual 2003 NBA draft, where we saw LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, D Wade, that whole banana boat crew pretty much steer the ship and change the direction as far as the league is where it's going to go. And quite honestly, that is the draft class that shaped the NBA for years. It's going to be very hard to say that you're going to find another draft class that good to really change the league itself. It's very hard to find that, and to see Carmelo Anthony. We already saw D Wade take his final steps, but for Carmelo Anthony now to do the same, he's going to go down as arguably one of the best players to ever play the game without winning a championship. And if I'm Carmelo Anthony, considering that I won 3 gold medals, you know, I was one of the only people that actually played 4 times with the Olympic teams, and have the experiences that I've had in this league, while also being a top 15 scorer in the league and one of the best bucket getters to ever be created in the league, I tip my hat off and say, career job well done. It's already hard enough to get players to play even past 5 years in the league. You're talking about 19, 20. That's legacy. And that's top tier Hall of Fame status. He's going to go down as a Hall of Famer. Very happy for him. And I do hate, and I do agree with you. Sometimes it does feel like it is forced. He does have a lot in the tank that I believe he can still give the teams. But you can tell from the video, he's at peace with the decision. He's focused on moving forward. And moving forward for him is being more of a father figure and a coach to his son, which is already a special thing within itself, and continuing to build a legacy through Kion, and not just passing the legacy to Kion, but allowing Kion to build his own. And that's something that's very special for any type of man that has a son that's trying to follow in his footsteps. And that's more important than anything. So obviously, shout out to you, Carmelo. I'm going to miss you in your Jordan game, because them Jordan sneakers was bad, man. I still have I remember just going to the store and looking at a pair of myself, like, yo, I'm going to cop those one day, because he had them like that. But, job well done, Carmelo. Job well done.
I got a story for you in regards to Melo's first shoe, man. I'll never forget when that shoe first came out. I begged my mother, and I wasn't even a Denver Nuggets fan, to get me that shoe on Black Friday. We went everywhere for that shoe, bro. And I was able to find it, I believe, in Forest City Mall. And I got a suit with it and everything, man. I was, I felt like the man when I had the Melo 1.5s on. And it was a big deal. And you're right, they did do a lot for the league. And when you consider that with this news that came out on Melo's retirement, that LeBron is the only player still standing from that 03 draft class, which included not just LeBron and Melo and D Wade, but guys like David West, Josh Howard, Kyle Korver, Kirk Heinrich, key role players that played big factors on successful teams. And you think about that, it's amazing. And you also say he's one of the best players to not win a championship. He's one of the best players to never even play in the NBA Finals. But he elevated every team that he played on in the prime of his career. He took a Denver Nuggets squad that we're on the verge of seeing advance to their first ever NBA Finals from the dark into a perennial contender. Who's to say Nikola Jokic's life is easier in Denver if not for Carmelo Anthony?
Yeah.
And he brought that franchise into relevancy. He really did. He made it cool to be a Denver Nugget. And I hope that they do the right thing someday and retire Carmelo's number 15 alongside of Nikola Jokic's number 15, because I don't give a damn how things ended there. He took that franchise to a place it hadn't been in 2009 since 1985, and that's where they are right now in the Western Conference Finals. And you have to tip your cap to him for being able to do that. He almost took the New York Knicks to the Eastern Conference Finals in the midst of a time where that organization did not have any successful seasons. And he brought a buzz back to the Mecca known as Madison Square Garden. And maybe had he been a member of the Big Three, or if he got drafted number 2 as opposed to number 3, the slot that which Darko fell in number 2 to the Pistons, maybe his career is different with a young Chauncey Billups and a young Tayshaun Prince, a veteran like Ben Wallace and Rasheed Wallace in the fold. He could have been to them what Kawhi was to the Spurs, but we'll never know. So I have so many questions when it comes to Carmelo Anthony's career, to where I feel as though we need to provide perspective to those who don't understand just how tough it is to win in the NBA and how much the parts around you, whether you're a superstar or not, play a vital piece in that.
Most definitely. It's very tough to win in the league. And for Carmelo Anthony to do what he did, you can ask Charles Barkley. Now, he's always been revered as one of the greats to ever do it, but he hasn't won a championship. Dominique Wilkins, those guys, means something for them to be that impactful on the court and still not win championships. But Melo is an even better person, in person. Off the court, he's even a better person. When All-Star Weekend was here, I actually ran into him at an event that he was supposed to speak at. And I had to leave early to go to another event. But I ran into him and Kion going outside. And as I was going outside, I was like, "Oh, what's up, Melo?" He's like, "Yo, what's good, bro? How you doing?" He just actually tried to have a conversation with me with Kion coming out of being chauffeured out of the SUV. And just for him to do that alone, knowing that he was running late to this event, and he had stuff to do, that just showed that dude he's a real people person. He does care about the people and being approachable to those guys. And that goes a long way, especially as for media members as well. That goes a long way in building rapport and relationships with people. That could change the demographic of the future. And Melo is one of those nice guys that just deserves his flowers where he's due, man. I hope his jersey numbers are retired. But that's remains. I know for sure New York probably will. Denver remains to be seen. But no matter what it is, he's well worthy and deserving of all the success that's coming to him and all the flowers that are being sent to him, as the NBA is now looking forward to becoming that much closer to turning the page to a new era of basketball.
For sure. And I don't doubt one bit that the Knicks will retire number 7 for him.
Yeah.
I don't think any player has worn it since his departure. And he wanted to be a Knick at a time when most superstars didn't want to even dare come over there. Him and Amari. And I give Amari his flowers as well, even though it didn't work out as planned due to injuries. But Carmelo sure as hell tried to do his part to help him in their pursuit and effort to try and win a championship or just bring a state of relevancy back to New York City on the basketball front. But I want to move into discussing these conference finals, man. Lakers and the Celtics, they both find themselves on the verge of getting swept as the Nuggets and the Heat appear to be on a collision course to meet in this year's NBA Finals. I'm going to open it up, take some time to discuss our thoughts through the first 3 games of both series, starting with the Lakers and the Nuggets, who will be set to tip off shortly as we record this podcast at the top of the week. What are your thoughts on this series thus far? And what do you make of what you are currently witnessing from these Denver Nuggets, man, who just seem to be not only on a mission, but hell-bent to win that Larry O'Brien trophy by any means?
They've grown up. That's it's just plain and simple. They've grown up. They're one of the few teams that actually kept their core players and did everything they can to build around those core players. And Jamal Murray, you know me, we've had different X factors for the Denver Nuggets to win the championship. But you know me as the guy that said Jamal Murray has to be that dude. When Jokic was doing his thing, Jamal Murray has to step up and be that number 2 Robin sidekick. And he's shown that it don't matter what part of the game he can start off struggling, he'll catch heat at the right time and put the Denver Nuggets over the hump. Or he can start the game off strong and let you know that, you know, I'm not getting cold this go around, and put coals of fire in your head and you have no choice but to deal with it. He's shown up in such a way to where he's reminding me a little bit of Bubble Murray. He's bringing some of that Bubble Murray to this Western Conference Finals and solidifying his status as a solidified number 2, and that he's more than just so-called quote unquote damaged goods. He is a caliber player that you could win with. And to have that on top of Jokic playing well, obviously, but of course, and also having Michael Porter Jr. playing well in timely fashions, you know, along with those other side players, role players per se, it's going to be tough to beat. And they're showing that this ain't no fluke. They're the real deal. And the Lakers, as great as they have been with the revamping of the roster and and working with LeBron James and AD to get healthy enough to get back to the Western Conference Finals, it's not enough. It's just simply not enough. And if anything, this is a blessing for the Lakers, because you're going into an offseason where there's a lot of question marks. And you can figure out what those question marks are based on the fact that when the lights shine the brightest, who shows up and who doesn't. Your question mark is on the point guard position. D'Lo is showing that even though he can be that guy, he may not be when the lights shine brightest. You have question marks on Rui Hachimura. Well, Rui's showing you that he can do it, that he's deserving of that paycheck. Same with Austin Reeves. What are you going to do to solidify those positions? Are you going to keep them or not? Like, there's question marks that in his own ways has been a blessing in disguise for the Lakers. However, Denver has shown that they have grown, they've matured, they've you know, pushed themselves that much further to where they're a legit team now. You can't question whether they're going to make it through or not anymore. They've shown that they're growing, they're ready to roll, and this is their time to win. So that's what's making this special to me, especially seeing Jamal Murray step up in the way that we know that he can step up. When you got that going on, good luck.
Yeah, well said, man. My main takeaways, honestly, bro, is that Joker's finally a joker, shall I say, excuse me. He's finally getting the help that he needs.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about Jamal Murray and the impressive performance and outings that he's had, especially when it comes to getting to it on the pick and roll action. What about Bruce Brown Jr., man?
Yeah.
His activity on both ends of the floor. I always thought that this was a guy who, if he ever found the right destination, could help a contender in many ways with his energy and his activity. You add that on to having a veteran like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, a guy who this Lakers squad and LeBron and AD know very well, having captured a championship with him a few years ago on the other side of things against this Nugget squad in the bubble, who they had to overcome in order to get to the Miami Heat and knock them off in 6 games, hitting big time shots in catch and shoot situations. What's amazed me with this group is how incredible their ball movement has been and how it's been used to turn down good shots for even better shots. And they cashing out on them. They cashing out on them. This team can run off about 4 to 5 threes within a matter of a minute and a half and turn a game that you thought was not in their favor within their full favor. And that's the scary part about this Denver team. Jokic was in foul trouble for the majority of game 3. And that was the time, I thought, for the Lakers to strike. And they did. But the role players kept them afloat. And even though Michael Porter Jr. has not put up big numbers, he's making an impact on both ends of the floor and making timely shots as well. They're getting timely contributions from the role players beside Jokic. And I've been fascinated to see that because, like you said, it shows their growth. And they've been to these playoffs, to me, with a team that we're going to get into in a moment were the last year's playoffs. And I think you know who I'm talking about. They was on the other side in the East. And we're seeing their growth. Do I think it'll culminate in a title? I don't know. But they're sure as hell looking like the favorites. And I can't help but give them their credit for that. Now, when I look at the Lakers, I see Anthony Davis doing his thing, putting up 28 and 14, shooting over 50% from the floor. However, he does not have the same matchup advantage against this Nugget squad that he had in the previous series in the second round against the Golden State Warriors. And as a result, he's been forced to work. And even though he punished the Nuggets in the paint, he's been a menace on the glass. You could tell in game 3, he was tired. He got real tired. And it's taken a gang-like effort from the likes of AD, Rui Hachimura, and even Jared Vanderbilt to try and contain these guys. They don't really have an answer for Jamal Murray. I think that's showing. Ever since game 2, when he found his momentum in the fourth quarter, he's been hotter than fish grease ever since. And I don't know what they do, but like you said, one positive about it is they're definitely finding out some answers. Guys like Austin Reeves, I don't know if they're going to be able to keep him. That dude is looking like a player that's going to be coveted by many teams, and rightfully so. But that point guard issue is definitely looming large. And there are times where D'Angelo Russell looks like he shouldn't even be in a rotation. Because if you're not going to hit threes at a high clip, and I can't get much out of you defending, then I may have to pull the plug on you differently than what Chris Finch did when he was in Minnesota and was playing Pat Bev over him in crunch time. I think that's a guy that really has seen his stock plummeted on the free agency market going into this summer. But I want to move on from that series and ask you about your thoughts on this Boston-Miami series. This is a series where the Heat, the lower seeded team, the 8th seed, a team that was about 3 minutes or so away from seeing their playoff run in at the hands of the team that resides in the city in which we reside, the Bulls. They was almost done. But now they see themselves one win away from reaching their second NBA Finals in the last 4 years. What do you make out of this series, man, that in a lot of ways has kind of made Jimmy Butler look like a prophet? Because I don't know if you recall last year, He said in game 7, after game 7 rather, that we'll be back on this stage. They coming back with a bang.
Yeah, when I think about Boston, I think about it's a lot you could think about when it comes to Boston, honestly. But the biggest thing right now, difference in coaching, different in leadership. Joe Mazzulla, as great as he has been this year, he ain't Ime Udoka. Ime Udoka has shown leadership-wise since when he was in Boston that I'm not only going to rely on my guys, my two-headed monster and Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum to go to work, but I'm going to create for others in such a way that they can exploit their matchups when the opportunities present themselves. And you don't see a lot of that going on in here, when it comes to this team. And part of it is because Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum have kind of shown they don't trust those players right now. But a lot of it is also with the fact that the different offense. And when it's time for you to make adjustments, Joey hasn't made the adjustments they need to make. It's just plain and simple. His game 3, last game press conference, you lost 2 games at home. If Ime Udoka was coaching, Boston would have won game 3. But in this case, Joe Mazzulla says, I didn't have my team ready to play. That's on me. To me, you can't let that happen when you're down 0-2 and you lost both games at home. That's a problem. That's a disconnect. And all that done is just exploits more and more what the issue is. And we already know Jaylen Brown has kind of been a little bit of a disgruntled star all season long. It don't help when he says there's a lot of issues on this team after you lose that game the way that you did. Right now, he's kind of showing that he's ready to pack that thing up and go. So Boston's issues have a lot more kinks and wrinkles than they think. And other people really do think. And I think this is pretty much it for them. But that being said, Miami this year, they just smell blood. They just smell blood. They're that much more aggressive. And I think we got a much better version of Jimmy Butler this year compared to last year. Because this version of Jimmy Butler is the version we've been waiting for the longest. This is the Jimmy Butler we saw in the NBA Finals during the bubble when he really reeled his team to win 2 games in games when they really shouldn't have won those games. This is the Jimmy Butler that when he's aggressive and he gets going, it's deadly. And what makes it that much more deadly for Jimmy Butler is not just him looking for his shot aggressively, but also being a facilitator on the floor, creating for others so that guys like Bam Adebayo can give you 20-plus points and win. So that guys like Max Strus, Duncan Robinson, Gabe Vincent can give you, and Caleb Martin can give you timely threes and knock them down with confidence. That's that type of Miami Heat team will kind of disrupt you and make you misjudge them for being an 8 seed. We haven't seen that all season long. And now that we have seen this, once Miami gets clicking like that, it's deadly. So that's what I think the difference really is. Jimmy Butler empowering himself along with his teammates to play at such a level that maybe at some point in time, Boston kind of took for granted. And they're paying the price for what that looks like because it's not just Miami killing it. It's Boston not having the answers to combat what Miami's doing, which is unlike the team that from the dynamic and the way they were last year.
The biggest difference to me when I look at this year's Boston squad versus last year's, that defense is not the same. You talk about how you think they would have won if Ime Udoka was the head coach in game 3. I don't know about that. But I do know one thing about Ime Udoka and what he did do and what he was willing to do that Joe Mazzulla does not do. And I don't want this to come off as though I'm throwing Joe Mazzulla's feet to the fire. People need to understand he's a first-year head coach. He's a young head coach. There's also a young head coach in the NFL right now who currently has a Super Bowl title who got exposed by a great head coach in his first Super Bowl appearance. And that was Sean McVay at the LA Rams.
Yeah.
So I want to provide some perspective here for people who say, well, we should throw Joe Mazzulla's feet to the fire after season 1. Just to settle down on that. But getting back to the point, Ime Udoka, when shit hit the fan and a team was on a run, opposing team was on a run, you know what he would do? Timeout.
Yep.
I'm going to lash on you, Jaylen Brown. I see you not being committed to the defensive end. Tatum, I see you chucking up shots. I need you to get the ball moving and grooving and flowing. You can play your game, but you also need to empower others. When teams seek the double, pass it. You saw Jason Tatum being a way more willing passer under Ime Udoka than what you're currently seeing right now. And you know why that is? Because Ime Udoka was a guy that was forcing those young players to do what? To learn how to trust one another. Now, as a result of his departure out of Boston under circumstances that no one saw coming last summer that were HR related, you have a new coach who is young, trying to insert his principles into things, and there's no trust there. You also don't see him taking that presence of being a vocal leader on in the manner in which Ime Udoka did. And I think that's the biggest difference. I don't understand the fall off defensively because I just knew that this team was going to be solid defensively. But then what makes it all the more interesting is not only have they fallen off defensively, you go and look through the first 3 games of this series, Boston is a team that when they hit the 3 ball, they're at their best.
Mm-hmm.
Boston has to be shooting. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but Boston has to be shooting no better than like 30% from 3-point land. Because they're only making about 3 out of every 10 they attempt. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Miami, you talk about Jimmy Butler and how he's empowering his teammates, being a willing facilitator. You want to know how many points they created off of Jimmy Butler's passes yesterday? I believe it was 17. 17. And you talk about guys like Duncan Robinson, who has come from the dead in the wake of Tyler Herro's broken wrist and contributed in a major way. We're talking about a guy who has scored at least 15 points or more in 3 out of his last playoff outings with a 22-point performance in game 3 against Boston, where he shot 7-11 from the field and 5-7 from 3-point land. You talk about Caleb Martin. He's been a 3-and-D wing for them that they did not have a couple of years ago when they went to the finals in 2020 down in the bubble. And then we talk about guys like Gabe Vincent, who is an incredible 2-way player who the bigger the stage, the bigger his game gets. He showed promise last year in the playoffs. Jimmy Butler, in 3 out of the last 4 postseasons down in Miami, has been arguably one of the top 5 players in the league. He turns into like a different animal. You know that he's going to be able to get it with the best of them in the mid-range, but when you see him empowering his teammates the way that he is, you understand more why they've been saying we don't view ourselves as an 8th seed. We really think we're a number 1 seed. You see it by the way that they playing. And it's going to show a lot of teams that you can't always judge a book by its cover. And what I mean by that is this was a Heat team during the regular season. Last year, they hit threes at the clip you see them doing now in the playoffs. This season, however, they didn't do that. You're getting contributions from guys like Kyle Lowry off the bench and Kevin Love, who, as soon as he's getting rebounds, is giving his best Tom Brady impersonation with the outlet pass. and is leading the buckets in transition. I just see a team in Miami right now that believes in one another. And I see a Celtic squad that is in disarray. And speaking of disarray, I want to ask you some questions about the Celtics, man, because this is a team that's the reigning Eastern Conference champion. Is this storied franchise in a state of crisis? And I'm going to start by asking you, do you believe that there's a decision to be made as to whether the Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum pairing can work?
I think they know for a fact that it can work. Because ever since they were there, with the right situation, they can flourish. They've always flourished. They both made All-NBA. So it's very real that Boston can make this lineup work or make that duo work. The problem is, at this point, the coaching of it. You need coaches that they trust and buy in with. You mentioned how the difference between being bought in with Ime Udoka versus Joe Mazzulla right now. I think Boston was a little too hasty in giving Joe Mazzulla that extension, because at the end of the day, you're seeing the ramifications of what Joe Mazzulla has to learn and how it is not just benefiting, but also negatively impacting the Celtics roster when you have two stars on your team that aren't necessarily playing it the way you want them to play. You mentioned all the reasons why that takes place, and I completely agree with you. A lot of that stems from coaching philosophies, implementing a system that works for the both of them and that the players can buy in and trust. That's the difference between what Ime Udoka brought to the franchise and what Joe Mazzulla is dealing with right now. And that disconnect is too serious right now, to a point where you have to choose players. Right now, you have a better advantage if you had a chance to choose the coach that fits the players first. But since you jumped the gun and created a long-term situation for Joe Mazzulla, Jaylen Brown's still a disgruntled star. Do I think he is automatically going to leave? Not necessarily. That's still to be determined. But this doesn't make it any better. You getting swept by the number 8 seed in the West Eastern Conference Finals, a situation where you won last year and just played in the NBA Finals. You regressed this season, and there's moments where Jason Tatum has struggled. There's moments where Jaylen Brown has been more of the prevalent guy. Jason Tatum hasn't shot a field goal in the fourth quarter yet in this series.
And to add to your point real quick, before I let you continue, because I have the numbers here. In game 3 of the blowout that Miami had against Boston, Jason Tatum scored 14 points on 6 for 18 shooting from the floor.
That's not going to get it done
at all. I agree.
And what makes it worse is you've already made it known that Jason Tatum is your number one guy. And we always had the conversation that if Jaylen Brown, as he continues to rise, he might be putting himself in that conversation where you may not be so hasty to give Jason Tatum a number one title. Now, obviously, Jason Tatum over time has proven that he's the number one guy. But with him being the number one guy and your sidekick is doing everything he can to step up, and in a situation where Jason Tatum has regressed in moments where he should be shining the brightest, if I'm Jaylen Brown, I will be looking like, this is your number one guy? Because I've been the most consistent one in these playoffs compared to him. So I'm not saying that Boston's is going to break up the duo. I doubt they want that, nor they shouldn't want that. But if anything, this is eye-opening for Jaylen Brown, and saying that if I've been this disgruntled all this time, just maybe I should really look at my other options elsewhere, because you can't necessarily trust Jason Tatum at this point, as great as he is, and he's probably going through and this is just part of the growing process. He's shown that when the situation matters the most on the biggest stages, outside of his Game 7 performance against the Sixers, he struggles to live up to the expectations of a performance versus Jaylen Brown actually living up to that name regardless of the situation that's being put in front of him. So I don't think Boston's gonna let them two go, but Jaylen Brown may find his way out himself because of what he's dealing with and the fact that they regressed this year in such a dramatic way.
I say this on the Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum situation. I agree with you when you say I don't think they want to let them go. I think they'll do everything in their power to try and retain Jaylen Brown. But you know what? This stuff that we seeing right now from Boston, doesn't it make you understand why last summer you heard the reports about Brad Stevens inquiring about the services of Kevin Durant? They need a veteran in there that's been there and done that on a playoff stage. If not, at least able to settle those two alphas down and say, hey, I'm going to find a way to put you guys in positions to succeed. But before I could do that, you guys got to learn how to trust one another to get to where you're trying to go. And that's winning an NBA championship. We know that these guys can succeed individually, as you alluded to. They're all NBA performers. They've been all-stars multiple times. Jason Tatum has been in the conversation for the MVP award the last couple of seasons. We know what they can do individually. But the reason why I think this question is valid right now is because we talk about a duo that has been to several Eastern Conference finals over the last few years with multiple head coaches. Brad Stevens, Ime Udoka, and now Joe Mazzulla. But for some reason, they can't get it done. And Boston is a franchise that, if you ask me, they are in crisis. Because you know what starts to happen when you win as much as they win and you're getting to the conference finals year after year, if not every other year? People want to know, not only around the town, as they call it in Boston sometimes, but across the country, when are you going to win a championship? And if not, what are you going to do to ensure that you win a championship? Now, I do think that they jumped the gun too early in regards to the Joe Mazzulla full-time hiring, making him the permanent head coach after removing the interim tag and whatnot. I think they did remove that interim tag a little too early, especially when I look at the current market of head coaches that are available in the wake of all of these recent head coach firings around the league. But I'm going to get into that a little bit later. But do I believe it's a decision to be made as to whether the Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum pairing can work? Absolutely, I do. Absolutely. Jaylen Brown has every right to feel like he's a number one. When you consider not only the way that he's performed in these playoffs, when you put his numbers side by side with Jason Tatum, but the way he performed last year in the playoffs. Jason Tatum has had these moments consistently. And sometimes, even though Jason Tatum is a superstar in his own right and is a great player, you can make the argument that it feels forced that he is the de facto face of the franchise. It feels kind of forced in some regard, because if not for certain teammates rising to the occasion, he's a guy that would have been public enemy number one if they lost against the Philadelphia 76ers in Game 6 of the Eastern Conference semifinals, if not for what he did in the fourth quarter. A lot of people been waiting to empty the clip on Jason Tatum. Now, I ain't that kind of guy, but I do believe that fans across the country and in Boston have a right to ask that question. can you really win a championship with this duo? Because that's what it comes down to. We know individually that these guys are special. But if they're going to keep going through this over and over again, and you got guys like Jaylen Brown saying that basically our locker room is disconnected, that's a bad look. And if you a guy like Brad Stevens, who coached these guys, and you tried to get the best of the best to come in and do the job that you weren't able to do, and they not able to do it, then you damn right you got to think about it. And I don't know if a guy like Damian Lillard can help him. I don't know if it's a sign and trade possibility that you do with Portland involving Lillard for Jaylen Brown. I don't know if it's a deal that you do with Atlanta trying to get a Trae Young in the building. I don't know. But something has to happen. And I wouldn't be surprised if something does. But if it does happen, I feel like it will be forced by a player's hand. And I think that player will be Jaylen Brown. And it could be Jason Tatum. Because at the end of the day, both of these dudes going to have a meet with one another. Whether the front office makes it mandatory that they do, or they just do it amongst themselves. I know if I was in that locker room as a player, I would even say it. I don't care if I was the 15th man on the bench or if I was the 6th man. Somebody got to say it, because I think it is a decision that needs to be made, especially when you find yourself on the verge of going home in the Eastern Conference Finals for the second time in the last 4 years to this same Miami Heat team for the most part.
And you're getting swept on top of it.
Right.
That's
after you got to the finals last year, and in my opinion, you were the better team than Golden State. You just made more mistakes in which the more experienced Warrior squad took advantage of. But I want to ask you real quick. We talk about Joe Mazzulla, and we talk about these head coaches that have been fired and how this would be a perfect time to strike while the iron is hot if they wanted to make a bold move. In the wake of all the recent head coach firings across the NBA, do you think that Joe Mazzulla's job is safe? I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because it's his first year and he's 34 years old. I usually wouldn't do that. And it's a possibility that he might not get it, especially in this current NBA climate that we're in right now, where everything is championship or bust. But what you think?
I'm like you. I'll give him another year to figure out and see what's going on. I wish Boston did what Brooklyn did with Jacques Vaughn. You gotta extend you for another season, see what you do. Know that we're committed to you, but we're not necessarily going to force our hand from a long-term perspective until we really feel and believe that you can do the job at hand. And Jacques Vaughn is someone that we already knew should have been, that's coach long-term because of what he can do when you give him the right talent. They win. That's a given. So we knew he was capable of doing the job, and when opportunity presents itself, he rises to the occasion. But for Boston per se, you knew that technically, let's just say you didn't fire Ime Udoka. You suspended him for the year like you was originally going to do. You was going to bring Ime Udoka back and move Joe Mazzulla back down to the assistant coach position. Would that have been a smart move at that time, considering that Boston, like you said, if considering all odds, yeah, I think it would have been a smart move, because Ime Udoka was the X factor of getting Boston over the hump. Now that that's not the case, yeah, I can't trust that Joe Mazzulla is that guy for Boston until you have to sit down with Ime and be like, yo, bro, how did you do this? Because the reality is, if you don't get Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum on the same page together consistently, you're not, like you said, you're going to experience what you just experienced in this year. You're going to be running circles. And considering the situation, yeah, I think Boston went too prematurely on this. I can't say there's not going to be a case where it's completely safe. Because like you said, with the climate of the way this head coaching market is, he can be fired as soon as the season's over because Boston didn't like the fact that they got swept like that.
Absolutely.
He can be like, nope, that's it. We're going to find another coach. And I won't be surprised if that happens. But right now, I think he's safe because Boston has to live up to the fact that they were hasty enough to give this guy a long-term guaranteed situation. And they don't want to look dumb by doing that. I just don't see them looking, trying to face that. They got to make sure that they're going to stick to the decision that they made and make sure that it pays out over time. And especially with the Emmanuel Udoka situation taking place. So I think he's safe for at least this year. I don't know about the long-term thing because I know they're going to want to work that out considering they gave Joe Mazzulla that long-term tag. But if it's not getting any better, I can't see him, being there too much longer because the expectations have been raised so much for this franchise back to what it originally was, which was to win championships.
Oh, the standard in Boston is always win championships. For those that don't know, they don't hang up Eastern Conference championship banners atop of TD Garden. All those banners you see are world championship banners.
Yep.
In the TD Garden. And it's been like that for years. Even in the old Boston Garden. That's one thing I respect about Boston. They don't hang up division banners, Eastern Conference. They don't care about that shit. They want a championship. That's the only thing that matters. And the late, great Red Auerbach wouldn't want it any other way.
Yep.
But I think he's safe. But at the same time, I could understand if they wanted to move in a different direction, why they would. I just don't know how you do that after signing him to a deal. A deal, by the way, that's undisclosed. No one knows how many years that's for. And that's the scary part about it. And another thing that concerns me is what is the state of this team going to look like should they get swept? Because I believe that they are. Miami is undefeated at home this season in the playoffs. I don't know how you find a way to overcome the momentum that they've built. I just don't. And something's got to change. Something's got to change. But it's bad because I look at a guy like Malcolm Brogdon, who they got during this past offseason. Hell of a presence for him. Won 6th man of the year over there. I don't know. I don't know what to make of Boston right now, man. And they are in a crisis because coming off of the year that they had combined with the start that they had, because for a good part of the year, they were the number 1 team in the league. They had the best record in basketball until Milwaukee got hot and went on the road in like mid-February, going in the early part of March. I think he's safe, but game 3, if I was Wick Grousbeck in the ownership group in Boston, it would make me do a lot of looking around, man, to see what's going on. And you talk about how Joe Mazzulla should have a conversation with Ime. Well, I got news for you, buddy. Ime in Houston. He ain't trying to help the competition no more. If you was going to try to do that, should have tried to do that this winter behind closed doors or something, man, because for some odd reason, this group seems to be lost. And another thing I don't get that he didn't do this series was he didn't call Rob Williams' number enough for me. A guy who was a difference maker last year, all the while playing with injury. Now he's fully healthy, and you're not calling on him.
He's going to be in this desperate situation to do that now because they're, like you said, they're about to get swept. And, yeah, Miami has always had their number. That's always been a given. But it's a failure to go out in this manner when you reached the NBA Finals last season and was 2 wins away from winning it all. That's unacceptable. And, Joe Mazzulla knows better. and he just can't sit here and think that, oh, I'm just a rookie. I get it. I'm still learning some things. I understand that's still some of the case, but this is the difference between being in that seat in the playoffs and being in that seat in the regular season. And Boston should have knew that before they gave him that extension, because now he's comfortable.
I don't know if he's comfortable, but I'll say this much. I appreciate him taking accountability, and saying it's my fault for the game 3 loss. A real head coach does that. But at some point, these players got to take some accountability too.
Mm-hmm.
Because these guys been together for several years. They've been getting the Eastern Conference Finals no matter who the head coach has been. The problem is they haven't been able to win the Larry O.B. And Joe Mazzulla, he was always going to have some growing pains. I just don't know if people expect it to be as bad as it was. And one thing about the playoffs, when you have growing pains in the playoffs, like he's been experiencing, they get exposed in a grander light because the whole country is watching. It's different when it's the regular season. Some things get glossed over. Some people don't pay attention to that, especially if you're not keeping up with the full 82. And that's hard to do, even for a beloved basketball fan like myself. But that to me is the issue as well. Like, players got to take accountability too. It's not just Joe Mazzulla. Joe Mazzulla was always going to have these growing pains. But I also, for those that seek to push back and say, well, he shouldn't have been in the seat. No way. He's 34 years old. That don't have nothing to do with it to me. It's the fact that he's operating in a Phil Jackson-like manner with a team that I don't believe you can do that with. This ain't Mike and Scotty. This ain't a team that's won multiple championships. You could just let them play through everything fully and be like, all right, team on a 15-0 run. I'm not going to call no timeout. No, I have to call a timeout with this team because they still trying to learn how to take that next step, and they ain't done it yet.
I agree with you, man. It's not the same. And I hate that, a team like Boston is going through that, but at the same time, man, you like you said, you did this to yourself. You shot your own self in the foot numerous times. And this is what the repercussion of what it is. You're eventually going to bleed out. You're bleeding out to a point where, Miami is going to really take over your number. Because one thing about Jimmy Buckets, when he smells blood, he smells blood. He's going for the kill. You can't wait. You can't linger and expect for him not to come out blazing. And he's going to come out blazing in the only way that Jimmy Butler can blaze. He's going to get to his sweet spots. He'll make his jump shots, but he's going to slice and dice you in the facilitation game. And he's going to do it in such a way that, you don't call those timeouts, you'll be in Cancun. It's pretty simple. And you know what? You might even catch Braun on the way because I think they're going to lose tonight. So you can figure out what's going on with them two together in Cancun while the Miami Heat is raising the rafters of a Eastern Conference Finals championship that you should have won. And, they're going to take advantage of going into the finals.
Speaking of Nuggets and Lakers, which is currently in action as we recording this right now, I want to move back into that series a little bit and ask you your thoughts on Nuggets head coach Mike Malone, who's been expressing a lot of his displeasure with this national narrative that he speaks of during the Western Conference Finals in his post-game press conferences, among other thoughts over the last week. He said no one talked about Nikola Jokic's 34-point, 21 rebound, and 14 assist night following the Nuggets win against the Lakers at home in Game 1 in Denver, adding that the national narrative following the series opener was that the Lakers were fine after, just one game in the series, in addition to telling the media to put that in your pipe after the Nuggets took a 2-0 lead in the Western Conference Finals, taking jabs at Lakers all-star forward Anthony Davis, saying that he's just playing free safety and sitting in the paint for 8 seconds at a time after they won on the road against Los Angeles in Game 3. What do you make of him expressing these displeasures with the national narrative? Me personally, I get that you want to rile your guys up. I get that Denver may have been the most overlooked number 1 seed in the playoffs since probably, I'd say, the 2014 Indiana Pacers during the Paul George, Roy Hibbert era. They probably were the most overlooked number one seed in the last 9 to 10 years. But I don't take no offense to that, even if I was a guy like Mike Malone, because I know the team I'm playing against is the NBA's version of the New York Yankees. I also know that I'm coaching in a small market. And I also know that I can talk all the trash I want, but if my guys don't play up to par, people are going to say what they want to say anyway. And it's only going to rise even more if they don't win it all, especially now with them having a 3-0 series lead.
Who cares? You know who you're playing against. Who cares? You don't think LeBron James, a LeBron James-led team is not going to be talked about more than what you bring to the table? This is LeBron James. You was an assistant coach with LeBron in Cleveland. You know what it was like to constantly hear about LeBron James, the chosen one. He's coming. He's going to get his ring. You were the assistant coach in his very first finals appearance. So you know what that's going to look like. And you want to complain. Oh, I'm not getting enough attention. You're not the bastard child out of all this. Like, grow up, man. It's okay. We know that it's a given. You're playing the Lakers with a LeBron James-led team in Tinseltown, which is the number one market on the West Coast, top 2 in the world, and they're known for stars. They're known for, you know what the vibes are. Don't sit here and complain about the fact that you're playing against the Lakers that are actually doing well for once in the offseason, and you're going to sit here and talk about, oh, we're not getting enough love. This is what happens when you go to the NBA. This is what the Lakers do. Like, you know this already. So why are you complaining? Why? You've been prepared all this time. Like, why? Like, that's what came to my mind. Like, bro, you already knew what this was. And you was part of what led to this. Because you was on the team with LeBron James. So you really think you're going to sit here and tell me that you complaining that a team with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, top 75 players in the world, is going to sit here and not and get more public publicity over what you're doing? That's a given, bro. That was going to happen anyways. The only way you shut that up, you get to the NBA Finals. The only way to shut that up, you win the championship. That's all that matters at this point. Because as long as you do your job, you're going to get there. There was no chance you're going to get publicity everywhere else. Because you're not that squad. You're just not. And the only way you prove that is if you win. You finally have a chance to show that you're winning. Take advantage of it. Move on. Use it as motivation. Win the NBA Finals. But you weren't going to get that LeBron James. That's a horrible fight to want to have. Because you knew that wasn't going to happen. So why force your hand?
The thing I found funny about it was when he said no one talked about Jokic's performance. I'm like, I don't know if you have anybody in your circle, but like, just ask them if they got the DVR of Scott Van Pelt on SportsCenter after game 1. Because that's all they was talking about was Nikola Jokic. How could you not? Nikola Jokic been one of the most heavily discussed players in the league. He may not be top 10 in jersey sales. His game might not have the flash or appeal for a casual fan of the game, but like, we all been talking about Nikola Jokic. And even though I was a guy that if I had an MVP vote, yeah, I'd have voted Embiid over Jokic this season, the last couple seasons. I don't sit up here and say that he's not a top 2 or top 3 candidate or that he's not an all NBA guy. I had an issue with him being on all NBA second team this year. Jokic should have been on first team with Joel. The hell with positions. But like to sit up here and say, well, the national narrative was that the Lakers are fine. That may have been true, but no one ever said that the Nuggets didn't have a deep team. No one ever said that the Nuggets weren't the favorite. No one ever said that. But it's just like, the Lakers, on the other hand, it's the Lakers. That's like if I'm in the East and I'm the head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers without LeBron and I'm taking on Boston, yeah, it's probably going to be a large conglomerate that's for the Celtics. That's a hallmark franchise in the league. I think it's much ado about nothing. If you want to rile your guys up, I'm cool with that. But don't give the other team bulletin board material, especially a LeBron James-led team who, as you alluded to, you had the pleasure of serving as his assistant during your early days in the league as a coach with the Cavaliers while he was ascending into all-time status.
Should have known better, man. I just don't get it. I really don't. He should have known better. Don't be complaining now because you didn't get the candy you want when everybody else is getting their own candy. Sit down. Nobody got time for that, man. You about to get the ultimate candy prize in the championship, and you want to fuss about LeBron James and Lakers. He just don't. He must have forgot where he came from.
Speaking of LeBron, I want to have a brief discussion on LeBron. ESPN's Brian Windhorst had a recent episode on the Hoop Collective podcast saying that he was receiving texts from those around the league who believe that this is the end for LeBron. And he said, well, I'm like, okay, I realize it's not 2018 LeBron. I'll take my hat off, but he went for 23 and 12. I agree. It's not the guy who would go for 38, 17 and 12. Now, LeBron's numbers in this Western Conference Finals overall coming into this recording were 23.7 points, 10.3 assists, and 9.3 rebounds per game on 48.1% shooting from the field, but he's shooting 15.3% from beyond the arc. We know he's had tough times elevating, finishing in traffic with layups after beating a guy off the dribble, but we also know that he's dealing with a foot injury as well. Now, he's came out to start game 4 on a tear. He had like 20 plus in the first quarter. So he's looking like a guy that don't want to go home. But do we believe no matter what happens with this series that is currently unfolding between the Nuggets and the Lakers, do you believe, rather, Josh, that Father Time has caught up with him? I'll share my thoughts after you share yours.
Yeah, in its own way, yeah, it has. I mean, what do you expect? LeBron is 38, playing 20 years in the league. What makes you think Father Time's not going to eventually catch up in some way, shape, or form? He's not as athletic as he used to be, no, by any stretch. His body is starting to break down in small pieces, but over time, it's been breaking down. It's honestly what we're dealing with is a part of being part of a privilege to history in a lot of ways. We've been so numb to the fact that LeBron is so unstoppable for all these years that when we finally see something breaking down, oh my gosh, it's the end for LeBron. No, it's not the end for LeBron, but it's slowly but surely moving in that direction because the small things like his athleticism, he can't carry teams on his back like he used to. Those type of things are taking place, yes. But even in the Western Conference Finals, he's averaging 24, 10, and 10. Name any player that was top tier like that can give you those numbers consistently in that type of level of basketball.
At 38. Good luck. Yeah.
Good luck. You're not going to find too many. So LeBron James is still so good that even though he's descending in other ways that Father Timing is winning, he's still contributing in such a way for any other team. You'd be like, oh, dang, he's having a good season. He's having a good playoff. Like, that's the thing about LeBron James that we take for granted. We're used to seeing so much greatness that even though he's slipping, he's still performing great numbers. And we think, oh my God, he's gone. He's not the same. That's what 20 years of basketball can do to you. It's not like he's completely bad. It's just that time after time, slowly but surely, he can't carry teams in ways that he's used to. So more reinforcements have to step up. And you talk about the 15% shooting from three. Yeah, he has been a better shooter throughout his career, for sure. But it's not like he's always been primed as being one of the best shooters out there. It's not like he's known for shooting. He's never been known for shooting. That's just a skill set that he's improved on throughout his career. But he's not known for shooting. So 15% from three, you can't even really look into that too much because he's not a shooter. He's a scorer. He's someone that can score but also facilitate. He's an all-around player. So when you think about what he's contributing to this team right now, on a bad foot that needs surgery, he's still playing at 38 years old and giving you 24, 10, and 10, which is something a lot of players can't give. So has he slowed down? Yes. But is it so bad that he's out of the league? No, not at all. You giving me that in the Western Conference Finals? I'll take that any day. And that's going to continue for years to come because LeBron James' skill set is not always based on athleticism. It's based on legit skill, which we know LeBron James has. So he's fine. He's fine. I'm not worried about LeBron.
I'll say this when it comes to the situation with LeBron. Yeah, you will take those numbers. The 15.3% from beyond the arc, that is a little startling to me. Because even though we love to say that LeBron isn't known for his three-point shooting, LeBron, since the latter days he spent in Miami, has been a solid three-point shooter. Mm-hmm. He shoots at least 35% from three-point land. And he takes a high volume, but he's hitting them. He may not be a Kyle Korver type shooter, a Steph Curry like a Dame Lillard, but he finds a way to get it done. But I think a lot of that is due to not having the lift that he once had, which I also think affects him and his ability to finish around the rim. It's a lot of times I watch games and it's sad. And it's like, man, you know, LeBron in 2014, man, he'd have dunked that.
Right.
He wouldn't have sought to lay that up, you know, and miss that. Like, he'd have punished the dude for trying to even jump with him and flex his muscle a little bit. But he's become a more cerebral player as he's aged, like most. And the game has slowed down for him. Now, I agree with you when you say he's become a guy that can't carry a team for long stretches like he once did. Mm-hmm. But occasionally, he can turn back the clock for maybe several games or so, depending on how his body is feeling, and catapult you up in the standings.
Right.
But he needs a co-star besides him as he reaches the twilight of his 30s to say, you know what, Bron? I got you this time. I'm going to spot you. We're going to save your energy. Just get me set up. Or just let me set you up. And I think that's why having that ball handler who is not only a playmaker and a shot creator, but can score is going to be so crucial for the Lakers to get this upcoming offseason, no matter what happens. One thing people got to understand is that this team that you're currently seeing in Los Angeles was constructed on the fly at the trade deadline. It's remarkable that these guys have actually gotten to the Western Conference Finals as a 7th seed with so much or so little time, rather, to work with one another. And I feel like if LeBron was to lead this group to the finals, especially overcoming this deficit to do it, which would be a first in NBA history, it would be one of the greatest accomplishments in his career. Granted, he did that in Cleveland in 2018 with a different roster after the trade deadline, but to do this at the stage of his career, man. But has Father Time caught up with him? A little bit, but that was to be expected. I don't think it's the end, though, in regards to him possibly being able to compete for championships as long as you have the right pieces around him. I think this Lakers squad and I've said it before in private, and I say it publicly, I think this team needs a full training camp together with one another. And they will get some new pieces this offseason. I believe that no matter what unfolds over these next several days to a week. But as far as saying that it's caught up with them, tell me something I don't know. And if it has, he's still putting up a triple-double. And not to belittle the guy that he surpassed on the all-time scoring list to become basketball's all-time leading scorer, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but Kareem wasn't looking like this in year 20 or near that back end where he played. You know, Kareem played for a long time, but like he knew when it was time to go. I don't sense that it's time for LeBron to go. I think LeBron, with the way that he takes care of his body, could still give the game a great 4 to 5 years and play at a solid level, barring a catastrophic injury. The guy has a foot injury. He's trying to thug it out and play through it. You could tell he's not 100%, but to sit up here and say, well, it's caught up with him, it's kind of like beating a dead horse, if you will. Not that he's dead, but he's not the young spring chicken that he once was.
Yeah, it's like you said, that's already a given. And I guess when we think about it, yeah, you have to have the right pieces around him. That's always been the narrative playing with LeBron in general. You have to put the right pieces around him for him to be successful in the way you want to be successful. That's already been a given. But to still give you, like you said, a triple-double, and it's not like a 10-10-10. It's a 24, 10, and 10.
Yeah, no Jason Kidd.
Ain't no Jason Kidd. Like, come on now. You telling me that the clock has rewound on him that bad? No, not at all. And it won't be for quite some time, because that's the skill set he brings to the table. It's not solely based on athleticism. So because of that, like you said, he has some years left in him to where he can still play at an elite level or at a high level. He just needs the right pieces around him. And that's not going to happen this year, but next year could be a different story based on what they do this offseason. And obviously, Bron is going to come back better than ever. But he's going to do whatever it takes to make sure that foot is taken care of, his body's taken care of, like we always know that he will be due, and he'll be perfectly fine next year. We're not going to see athletic LeBron no more. But even for him to be this athletic, even at year 20, it's still crazy. The only person I can think of that was still that athletic at 20 was Vince Carter. Outside of that, no one was that athletic in year 20 of the league, let alone year 15 or 16 in the league when they were playing that long. So, yeah, we don't need to go too crazy into this at all. LeBron is going to be fine, and the Lakers will be fine. And all you're just seeing is, small chips at what Father Time will do to you if but LeBron's been known to take care of his body. And that's why he's been in the league and playing at this level all this time. So he's fine.
And, before we move on to the next topic, I think we've become so spoiled by the greatness of LeBron James that we take everything that he does for granted. I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine when he was in the midst of his 8 straight runs to the NBA Finals. And I would tell them every offseason, I'm like, people think this shit is like guaranteed. People just think, he got a magic carpet ride to the NBA Finals, and it's just like stamped and approved. Like, yeah, you going to the finals this year. It's not that easy, especially when you're doing it with multiple organizations, different pieces on a roster, different head coaches. Like, give the man his credit. Understand that, like his motto once upon a time, is earned. It's not given. I think when fans put that into full context and perspective, they'll realize just how blessed they were to witness this run, no matter how it comes to a close, because you don't see this often. And I'm not just talking about within basketball, but just sports as a whole. You don't see too many guys playing for 20 plus years. If guys could do it, everybody would do it. Mm-hmm. Everybody can't do it. That that's just the game. But I want to move on to a team that we've been talking about a lot these last several weeks and throughout the season. Philadelphia 76ers. Last time me and you met up, recorded on Open Run, we talked about whether or not Doc Rivers' days will be numbered. And to none of our surprises, Doc Rivers was dismissed by Philadelphia after 3 seasons of serving at the helm last Tuesday, shortly following last week's recording of Open Run, 2 days after the Sixers were eliminated by the Celtics in the Eastern Conference semifinal round for the 3rd straight season. The former Coach of the Year recipient and NBA champ delivered a 154-82 record in his 3 seasons with the Sixers, including 54 wins this year, which marked the most wins in franchise history since the 2000-2001 season when Philadelphia advanced to the NBA Finals under Larry Brown, as the Sixers were one of only 3 teams in the league to finish in the top 10 in both offensive and defensive efficiency this season. The search for a new coach is currently underway, and it's expected to include Mike Budenholzer, Sam Cassell, Mike D'Antoni, Nick Nurse, Frank Vogel, and Monty Williams, according to ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski, better known to many as Woj. Gotta ask you, what's your thoughts on the firing of Doc Rivers? I know it comes to no one's surprise, especially ours. It's not coming as a shock, but what's your thoughts on it? And who do you believe should be among the top candidates for this job opening?
I mean, we called it.
Oh, yeah. I didn't think it was going to come that quick.
Oh, I knew it was quick. I knew it was going to come quick because everybody else, because the president of everyone else's firings came quickly.
That's true.
So I knew for a fact that, Doc Rivers, days was numbered. Days been numbered. He's going to be gone as soon as they got the chance. So with him being gone, though, I would prefer Monty Williams to get this job. He knows what it's like to win with superstars. Get them. He's been to the NBA Finals with superstars, and I think he'll be one of the only coaches that's relatable to Joel Embiid in a way that no matter what happens with James Harden, Joel Embiid will have a trustworthy coach he can rely on. And with the fact that players do love playing for Monty Williams, it can help bring in people that may want to fill that void of what James Harden would have left if bearing that he does leave. But let's call it what it is. The Houston Rockets trying to make their way back to Philly, man. That's just the way I see it. It's obviously reports going out there that James Harden pushed for this firing to happen and take place. Won't be surprised if that's the case. The relationship wasn't great. But who would you fill him in with? Well, let's bring in the guy that gave him the ball in the beginning, Mike D'Antoni. There is no coincidence that Mike D'Antoni, out of all these years, all of a sudden, guess what? We can put him in, but we can offer him a job here. When the former Rockets president of operations and Daryl Morey is running the show over there in Philly, you best believe if they want James Harden to stay, they're gonna do everything they can to make this brother happy. How do you do that? Bringing in the head coach that made James Harden who he is now, Mike D'Antoni. This is the problem, though. By you doing that, if they really go that route, you're telling Joel Embiid this ain't your team no more. This is James Harden's team. And Joel Embiid cannot keep up with the pace of basketball that Mike D'Antoni wants to play. That being said, you'll be doing a disservice to Joel Embiid, and then you might be pushing him really out the door then real quick. That's not a long-term solution for Joel Embiid. So I'm just telling you right now, that's I feel the direction they're going to go. But they got to do everything they can to make James Harden stay and be happy while he's there. However, if they were smart, I would hope they would look at Monty Williams heavily, knowing that he knows how to win and he's one of the best coaches out there with player relationships. He would do well with Joel Embiid. And you get him a point guard over there, you already saw what that could look like. I think Monty Williams is the best person for that job. And if they want not just to expand Joel Embiid now, but expand him in the future. I think Monty Williams is the best route to go. But this definitely looks like a Mike D'Antoni signing. And if it does happen, it'll be Houston Rockets 2.0, as you already know and have been familiar with.
Oh, I know. I've been saying this since Daryl Morey went over there, that he was turning the Sixers and the Rockets east.
Mm-hmm.
He brought Tad Brown with him. Tad Brown, for those who don't know, used to be the former president of the Rockets. He is now the president of the Sixers, or the CEO of the Sixers. Excuse me. He was the CEO of the Rockets as well. He's the CEO of the Sixers. And he played a pivotal role in being like a mentor, like father figure to James Harden during his time in Houston. And I always knew when Daryl got to Philly that his priority would always be trying to get James Harden back in his arms. So if they were to go after Mike D'Antoni aggressively, I would not be surprised. And then think about this too, Josh. Before Mike D'Antoni took the job as the head coach of the Houston Rockets in the summer of 2016, several months after they had fired Kevin McHale, and then JB Bickerstaff, who took over on an interim basis in the wake of the McHale firing. D'Antoni was an associate head coach under Brett Brown in Philadelphia in 2015-16.
Mm-hmm.
So he already got history working in the Sixers organization on top of working with Daryl Morey, Tad Brown, James Harden, and don't forget the role players such as PJ Tucker and Daniel House, who also have Houston ties and connections. So I'm very familiar with that. And I wouldn't be surprised by that. And I could see how that could send the wrong message to a guy like Joel Embiid, who, if Mike D'Antoni was to be the head coach, Joel Embiid gonna have to get in the best shape of his life. I'm talking about tremendous shape, because you cannot be a big man in Mike D'Antoni's offense and not run the floor like a gazelle. I don't care if you play with your back to the basket or you able to stretch the floor. Mike ain't playing slow. Everything 7 seconds or less. But I don't think that may happen, even though if it did, I would not be shocked. You talk about Monty Williams, a guy that I wouldn't mind see get the job, even though it would be his first head coaching opportunity, is Sam Cassell. Sam Cassell is already an assistant coach on the Sixers. Mm-hmm. He has ties to Houston as well, being a former Rockets player, not during the Daryl Morey era, but he happened to win back-to-back titles in Houston with Hakeem Olajuwon, Clyde Drexler, Mario Elliott, and those guys in 94, 95. But he has a great rapport with James. He also has a great rapport with Tyrese Maxey. A guy like that could be what this team needs. A fresh voice that has years of NBA experience and has been long overdue for a head coaching job. If you ask me, he's paid his dues. Doc speaks highly of him. If you had that guy in house, he knows how these guys work and operate. Why not give him a chance? What do you have to lose? Because the way I see it, it was already pressure coming into the 22-23 season. It's going to be even more pressure in 23-24 after the way this most recent season ended, in which you blew a 3-2 lead in the Eastern Conference semifinals at the hands of the Boston Celtics. So I like Sam Cassell. I also wouldn't mind Monty Williams, especially with the job that he was able to do in Phoenix. Yeah, I don't think they would miss a beat at all with Monty Williams. Like you brought up in our most recent episode about Monty Williams having ties to USA Basketball, knowing guys like James Harden, having worked with those guys. It wouldn't be a bad hire, but a dark horse for me, and I don't know if he would want to coach again or if he wants to coach in the NBA, but I would have to give Jay Wright a call. I just would. He's in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
He's the man in Villanova. Look around the NBA right now. Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges. What do they all have in common? They went to Villanova. They won national titles. They may not be superstar names, but these guys are winning players. And one thing I know about Jay Wright, having had the privilege of watching him up close in person in the Big East when he was coaching in the midst of his successful run with the Wildcats, is that he is a positive dude. And he is a transformative leader. And I think that's what this Sixers group needs. And they also need someone that can help them establish a culture. Jay Wright can do that for you. Now, does he want the job? I don't know. Maybe TV could be cool for him. And he is in his early 60s. Had a hell of a career coaching at the college ranks. But if it was any job, I would expect him to want, if he was to come to the NBA level, it would be this one, because it's a match made in heaven. And you don't have to leave the city in which you spent the majority of your coaching career in.
No, those are very good points. You've been very big on Jay Wright from the beginning. So that doesn't surprise me at all. I really do like the Sam Cassell hiring. I honestly, unfortunately, just don't think it's that realistic because of who's running the operations up there.
No, I get it.
So, but I really do like Sam Cassell as well. It's about time he had a head coaching opportunity, not just from his time, here in Philly, but even back to what he was doing well with the Clippers in LA under Doc Rivers. Like, they've been instrumental to the success of both of those franchises. So I definitely love Sam Cassell, the idea of Sam Cassell. He should have been a head coach already, but why not give an opportunity in Philadelphia? I do like that idea. I just feel like if they're going to go for someone that's already established, already, has the chance and know what it takes to win, and know how to get to that type of level from a recent perspective, unless you're someone like a Mike D'Antoni, you just have that good of ties where you just want to plug them in. But Sam Cassell is a good option. I would not hate the fact that if Philly was to go that route, I think that really can be beneficial for them and well deserving of them to actually even go that route. I think it'll take a lot of guts for them to do that, but best believe I would not be mad at that at all.
Frank Vogel is an interesting name to monitor too, considering that he's an NBA champion head coach. And I think a lot of people forget that he's had success in stops such as Indiana and with the Lakers. And he's always had strong-willed, hard-nosed defensive teams. So that could be a wild card option. But I don't know how legit that might be. And I think a guy like Frank Vogel, when the day does come for him to maybe take one of these jobs, he's waiting on the right opportunity. And that would be a hell of an opportunity to walk into after what's transpired the last few years. Because if a guy like Doc Rivers, who led them to 154 wins in his 3 seasons at the helm, is getting fired, man, I don't know what to say. And then to even add more onto that, I believe the Sixers have had the second best record in all of the NBA during the regular season over the last couple of years. Only the Bucks have had a better overall regular season record. But the Bucks have won a title. They've been to multiple Eastern Conference Finals. Sixers have yet to get past the second round, so remains to be seen. But as we get to the closing moments of Open Run this week, I want to talk about the San Antonio Spurs, who won the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes, and they have received the number 1 overall pick for the 2023 NBA draft and the draft lottery. Rest of the NBA draft lottery order will go as follows. The Hornets have the number 2 overall pick. The Blazers will be at number 3. Rockets will be selected at number 4. The Pistons will be selected at number 5. The Magic have acquired the 6th overall pick in this year's draft, followed by the Pacers at 7, Wizards at 8, Jazz at 9. The Dallas Mavericks, they were able to fall into the top 10 barely after giving up a playoff spot to get it including a fine to the league for over $750,000, for rest of their starters near the second to last game of the regular season when they could have played for a play-in berth. They'd be at 10. Magic will also have the 11th overall pick, which they get courtesy of the Nikola Vucevic trade from a few years ago with the Bulls. Oklahoma City Thunder at number 12, Raptors at 13, followed by the Pelicans at 14. Real quick, we know that the San Antonio Spurs were by far the biggest winners of the draft lottery. You talked about it earlier in the show. They've had a rich history of bigs over the last 30 years. David Robinson, Tim Duncan, Victor Wembanyama appears to be next in line. Outside of the Spurs, who would you say were the big winners of the NBA draft lottery? And who would you say also were the biggest losers in the 2023 NBA draft lottery?
Man, winners, you can argue. You really could argue Portland actually is a winner because Portland Trailblazers, they already made it known that if they were to get a top 4 pick, they was trading that pick. They want to get a superstar next to Dame. And you need a piece and this is the draft where you want to have that type of pick to be able to shift to teams that may want to get that may be willing to potentially get rid of a star player to start rebuilding and retooling that spot with. So Portland to me is definitely one that for sure in their own way won the draft lottery. Team that lost, of course, the Bulls. It's a given. They lost badly with this deal. Not just because of the fact that they don't have a draft pick in this draft period. But it lessens the chances of solidifying one of the most ideal routes of fulfilling their point guard position or any void on their team with top 3 caliber talents. If they were to get the number 1 pick, you could have got Victor Wembanyama. That's an easy fill-in for Vooch. Vooch can go. If you got number 2, you would have most likely had a chance to get either Brandon Miller, who is a good 3-and-D person, and quite frankly, you wouldn't have to worry too much about filling in for Zach, or you could play him with Zach if they were to trade DeMar DeRozan. But you could also got your point guard. You could have got Scoot Henderson. You have no point guard. So since you have no point guard, Scoot Henderson would have been your fill-in. You're now literally completely bankrupt in all of those solutions right now. And there's no guarantee that you're going to fill that void anytime soon because of this Lonzo Ball situation. And I've talked to someone, Brandon Roy, who's been in similar situations, and he's brought some hope to Lonzo Ball. Actually suggesting that, as he tries to fight back and play in the league, one of the best ways or best players to actually look at from a point guard position that can help bring the longevity that he needs is an Andre Miller, which, when you think about it, very much can be an ideal situation for Lonzo Ball. But there's a problem. Lonzo Ball's not supposed to play this year.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bulls can't wait on a point guard. They can't wait on Lonzo Ball to come in and save the day, especially at the all-star level that we're accustomed to him seeing. So you got to make moves. And the Bulls have no clear vision of what that could look like without draft capital. So the Bulls definitely lost this run for sure. But Portland Trailblazers is the team to look out for because they're going to be aggressive in trading that pick to bring in someone big. And from what I've heard, their top 3 targets right now are Mikal Bridges, Pascal Siakam, or Jaylen Brown.
You saying for the Bulls?
For the Portland Trailblazers.
For the Portland Trailblazers, yeah. I can see that. I could definitely, but see, the Blazers to me, they're a winner for this for several reasons. They can look to trade it,
mm-hmm.
or in the event that they want to move in a different direction, away from Damian Lillard, could use that pick to either get a Brandon Miller or a Scoot Henderson depending on which one goes number 2, and build a new core around them.
Mm-hmm.
So either way, they win. And if they had gotten the number 1 overall pick, it really would have got very interesting, because you talk about pairing Victor Wembanyama with Damian Lillard. Oh man, that would have been crazy as hell to think about or fantasize about, but that's not going to happen. But still, they win because they landed a pick in the top 3 of the draft, and that's going to have enormous value, especially in a draft class where you have so much talent. So yes, I think that the Blazers won. Another team that I think won is the Orlando Magic.
Yeah.
The Orlando Magic is a team that has a ton of cap space. The Orlando Magic have 2 picks that are within the top 15 of the draft. And this is fresh off of drafting Paolo Banchero, who nearly averaged 25 and 5 and is the reigning rookie of the year. They also have Franz Wagner, players like Bol. Markelle Fultz had a stellar year there.
Mm-hmm.
If they wanted, they could easily seek to trade either one of those picks to fulfill a position of need, and possibly even go after a player that you named that Portland is expressing interest in. They could. They easily could. But we'll see. Another team that won to me is the Dallas Mavericks. You went out your way to basically say, we don't want to make the playoffs. We believe we're going to get a top 10 pick. You get a top 10 pick. You can use that pick to either facilitate a trade, maybe get your big man to pair with Luka Doncic from the desert and DeAndre Ayton, who the Mavericks have been linked to over the course of this weekend, a team that I thought about a few months ago, and I've said on this pod, could be a very great fit for Ayton. You know, they could seek to flip that, or they could use that pick to maybe get a shooter in the draft at that spot, such as a Grady Dick out of Kansas.
Yep.
You know, and use that to supplement their roster in the wake of some moves and some willing and dealing that we know that this team is going to make and they need to make. And you can also get a guy maybe like a Nick Smith Jr., a Keontae George, a Cason Wallace, or Anthony Black, who could really help them on the perimeter side defensively next to a guy like Luka Doncic. So they got options there at number 10. I think they were a big winner as well. As far as losers, you said it. The Bulls, by far the biggest loser. Not only did they not get a top 3 pick, even if they'd have landed the number 4 pick, you could have got a guy like Amen Thompson, who's a 6'7" point guard. And he could have helped you overcome your Lonzo troubles. But the fact that you don't get a pick within the top 4 of this draft and you lose it to a team that happened to convert one of your first round picks into Franz Wagner, and that's the Orlando Magic, who I said were one of the winners of this draft. They really ended up winning the Nikola Vucevic trade.
Yep.
Following the draft lottery. I thought they had won regardless, but this cements it.
Yep.
This fully cements it, because not getting in the top 4, you basically have no choice without any draft picks in this draft class that is rich with talent. You basically have no choice but to either trade into the draft, or you're either going to have to do some willing and dealing over the course of the summertime to improve and enhance your roster to get the 3-point shooting that you need, on top of the versatile big man that you need to elevate upward in the Eastern Conference. Another team that lost, I'd also say, is the New York Knicks. Yes, you have a bright future nonetheless. Signing Jalen Brunson was a tremendous pickup in the offseason. Leon Rose did a hell of a job. But that Kristaps Porzingis trade came back to bite him in the bullet just a little bit at the draft lottery, because now you don't have a top 10 pick. And if one of these guys ends up hitting and becomes like a big star, If you the Knicks, unless if you find a way to acquire a star via trade, it might take you a little bit more time than what it could have if you had that top 10 pick or just a pick that fell within the lottery. They're a loser, but not as big of a loser, I feel, as the Bulls are due to current circumstances that transpired over the season. But man, like, imagine a team like the Knicks having that pick on top of all the current crop of players that they have, such as Quentin Grimes, Emmanuel Quickly, Julius Randle, and others. Could have been real nice and intriguing to see out there in the Big Apple.
Most definitely, man. I will say that I have heard, and Casey Johnson has reported on this, but there's rumors circulating from the draft combine and draft lottery that the Bulls are going to be one of those teams that's willing to try to trade for that third pick with the Trailblazers. They're looking at trying to potentially trade Zach for that. I don't see it happening from my reporting that I've done because they want to build around Damian Lillard. And from what I've heard, they are cemented on getting either of those three guys because those are the three guys that Damian Lillard really wants to play with Mikal Bridges being number one. But I don't know if the Brooklyn Nets are going to want to flip that deal because then you just got Mikal Bridges and you pretty much stole him from Phoenix with the season he's had since he's been traded. I don't see Brooklyn pulling that off or wanting to pull that off. Pascal Siakam's very intriguing from a fit over there. And if that's the case, you have to wonder what they're going to do with Jeremy Grant. And obviously, when you talk about Jaylen Brown and Damian Lillard, that's nasty either way. But you know, I would assume that would have to be some type of sign and trade as well. And when we talking about Boston maybe needing a Damian Lillard, I don't see Portland even going down that route because they want to be with Dame. So I'm not saying that the Bulls don't have a chance of maybe pulling that off, but if you can get maybe a 3-team deal with the Bulls, Portland, and maybe the Brooklyn Nets, we can get more additional capital. Maybe that is something that the Bulls could be willing to pull off. And Portland may not have a choice because the other options may be so limited. But I'm just saying that's what's been heard. That's what I've heard and that has been reported. And from my reporting side of things, which we will also hear more from on the Biggs Bulldoze podcast, but that's going to be recorded this week.
I'm glad you plug in that.
Most definitely. But that's what I've heard from my reporting in the draft lottery and draft combine realm, of where they feel like things could potentially go with that direction of that third pick and how it pertains to the Bulls specifically. It's not completely out of the realm, I will say. It's highly unlikely. But the Bulls did interview Brandon Miller at the draft. They interviewed him, and I would not be surprised if they interviewed Scoot Henderson too, to do the due diligence to see what could be done. And I know we're eventually going to talk about the next topic about the Hornets. We could transition to that, but yeah. I'll let you transition to that.
For sure. I mean, as we know, Charlotte, they got the number 2 overall pick. If you was in Mitch Kupchak's seat in Charlotte, who would you select between Brandon Miller and Scoot Henderson? I see the arguments for both. I really do. Scoot Henderson would be a hell of a compliment to LaMelo Ball, but I feel like if you bring Scoot in there, he has to run the 1, and LaMelo's going to be playing way more off of the ball at the 2. He has the size to play the position. I believe he has the ability to play the position, as he's a knockdown, catch and shoot 3-point guy. But I don't know how he would be willing to receive that, considering how dynamic and great of a playmaker that he truly is in the pick and roll. And he would really have to buy in significantly for that to work. And when you talk about 2 young, precious talents like that playing with one ball, they're going to have to find a way to to make that work in a lot of areas. And Scoot, even though he needs to work on his 3-point shot a little bit more, he could be a nice complement to LaMelo's outside game with his inside game as well as his mid-range game. And that could be a scary backcourt pairing. But if it was me, I would take the safer route. I would take Brandon Miller. I don't think you could go any wrong with that. You pair him with a LaMelo Ball, who's going to seek to find him in transition, allow him to run the floor and finish, as well as a guy who can defend on the wing. You put him with Mark Williams, you get a couple of shooters around those guys. I think Charlotte could be in business. What do you think that Charlotte should do in number 2? Because that was a team to me that won as well. Because even though they're not going to get Victor Wembanyama, I don't think they can really do too bad with this number 2 overall pick, and that they're in a good place.
Yeah, for sure. For the most part, I think Brandon Miller is the safer bet. And honestly, more ideal bet, because you're talking about what LaMelo Ball can do. Brandon Miller can run the floor. He can stretch your defense. He's an upgraded version of Miles Bridges. You lost Miles Bridges due to, obviously, his unfortunate off-the-court situations. He's a nice fill-in plug to replace what you lost with Miles Bridges. And honestly, quite frankly, an upgrade. He's a better shooter. He has the more versatility in his game, and he's a better defender. So Brandon Miller is a good plug-in for that. Scoot Henderson, I think he'll need the ball too much. And he's, from his mentality perspective, he's that guy. He views himself as that guy. You put him with LaMelo Ball, I'm not going to say it can work, but it may not be too pretty either. And from what I've heard, reporting-wise, Charlotte loves Brandon Miller. They love Brandon Miller. And because of that, it looks like it's moving towards Charlotte taking Brandon Miller at number 2, which to me is the wise choice. Yes, he has his off-the-court situation. It has been talked about in the dress with all the teams that he has met with and interviewed with. But that is a situation for Brandon, we talk about on the court, as a top pick where he can actually thrive in. And, Portland, depending on what they do, whatever team ends up getting the 3rd pick, Scoot would do well with. Because 9 out of 10, the team that's going to be trading for them, they're going to need a point guard. And Scoot Henderson is the best option for that position this year, especially if you don't trade for Damian Lillard, or if you do trade Damian Lillard, like you mentioned before. But Brandon Miller's a safe bet. And I've heard that's, as of right now, the direction that Charlotte is moving towards. So as long as they can move towards that, you should see Brandon Miller as a Charlotte Hornet, and him in the backcourt with LaMelo Ball, knowing that you got Mark Williams down there as well. Not a bad young core to have.
Oh, not at all. And you talk about how teams seeking a trade with the Blazers for their number 3 pick will more than likely be looking for a point guard. I wouldn't be shocked if teams are trying to inquire with the Houston Rockets at number 4, because you got a kid like Amen Thompson as well, who has size and length, and I don't think he's a prospect that you can overlook alongside of his twin brother Asar. So it's that top 5 is going to be a real nice top 5, and one that I think you're going to have to monitor all of those guys very closely over the course of their rookie years come this upcoming fall. But yeah, if it was me, I would take Brandon Miller. And he's a kid that's actually not too far, or didn't grow up too far from North Carolina. Like, he's a Tennessee native. He has Southern roots. So I'm pretty sure he would want to stay close to home, and landing in Charlotte in the Queen City wouldn't be one of the worst places to land at all when you got a talent like LaMelo Ball that's a willing facilitator and a playmaker to help you and also assist you in regards to making your life easy on the floor. But with that said, I want to thank everybody who took out the time to listen to this week's episode of Open Run. Make sure that you check out my man Josh's article on the Bigs talking about the Chicago Bulls and how they are arriving at a very harsh crossroads as their road to improve their roster is as thin as it's ever been before after not finding a way to capture a top 4 pick in this year's NBA draft. Also, make sure to check out everything that we have to offer here at War Media, At Bat Podcast with Saul Rodriguez and Miles Porter, talking about the red hot bats of Luis Robert and Chris Morrell on the South and North sides, respectively, among so many other topics across the world of Major League Baseball. For myself, Gabriel Wilkins, my man Josh Hicks, so long, everybody.